مساعدة في الجامعة اللبنانية الأمريكية ومديرة الأبحاث ب IMRT Institute of Media Research and Training. لحتركها تعرف أكثر عن حالها وتحكينا عن المحاضرة. Thank you.
Okay, good morning everyone. I think most of you met me already. If you haven't, Shad already introduced me, so I don't want to go over that again. Just to remind you, I do speak and understand Arabic perfectly, but from an academic point, you know, it's a little bit difficult to do that. So if you want to speak Arabic, I understand and I can speak back, okay? So today I'm going to talk about framing in the media, all right? So framing, if you know it or not, we'll talk more about it. It's a theory, it's a framing, it's an analysis tool. We'll start with what it is and what it means to us, especially what it means to media literacy. And then we'll go to the approaches to framing, and then we'll focus on digital media, a little bit of social media, and I'll give you a few types of research studies that have done framing when it comes to conflict, all right? I won't be talking, I know in your program it says radicalization and extremism. I have a little part about that because Dr. Melki will be doing his lecture on the IC strategy and a lot of radicalization, so I think you'll have enough of extremism, okay? So we'll just focus on conflict in general and mainly wars. If you have any questions when I'm speaking, please feel free to ask. If it's very urgent, of course. If not, we can just leave the questions towards the end. All right, I'm going to start with a very basic and simple question and a very simple white slide. I don't want to have anything on it, just to ask you, what is news? A couple of days ago, you had a few sessions about fake news, correct? And they asked you what is fake news and you had answers. Well, we're gonna go beyond, behind, okay, not beyond, behind fake news, and just go to the basic of what is news to you. I know we have varying degrees of different expertise here. We have professors, we have students, we have journalists, so you all are familiar with the term. What is news to you? Yes. And it can be quick, so we don't have to, you know.
Good morning.
Yes.
Ideally, news would be defined as anything that you didn't know before.
Okay.
But again, that entails fake news as well. So
Sure.
I think news is about, it's an information, whether it's a new information or something old but you didn't know about, but at the end it should be a piece of information. Stories.
Stories, okay. What else? Think of what you saw today or last night that constitutes news.
Or what they said. I have to add that it's abnormal event or story.
Yes.
It's not wedding or...
Yeah, something that's unusual, and some literature calls it devious, something that deviates from the norm, right? And when I think I have some of my students here, when I talk about news in the news writing class, I always tell them, why aren't we on TV right now? Am I not important enough to be on TV, right? Because it's something normal, this is what I do. But if it's the president of a country, of the university, if anything, if anybody was doing my lecture, then of course he or she would be on the news, correct? So anything that is unusual. Any other explanations, any other definitions? Yes? You can scream. Information, okay, all right. Do we somehow all agree with all of this? I think we all do, right? Yes.
الأخبار هي أحداث تمتلك عناصر، يعني حتى تتكون الخبر قد تكون الأهمية، الشهرة، الإثارة، لازم تكون فيها عناصر، لو ما في هذه العناصر لم تكن أخبارا. يعني أكو أخبار تمتلك عنصر الشهرة، الأهمية، الإثارة، الضخامة، أي إذا لم تمتلك هذه العناصر لم تكن أخبارا. شكرا.
Yes, this is correct. This is what we call news values, correct? What makes a story worthy of being in the news, that's related to what we call newsworthiness. So we need all these values, and we learn them when we go to school. Yes?
It's information and the story that tells when, how, why, and what happened in any event.
All right, also correct. These are the basics of A news story. Okay. Is this news? First of all, do you recognize this photo? This is from the G20 summit in Hamburg in early July. Is this news? I'm sorry? Event, yes. Is it news? If you see this anywhere, you just went to YouTube, you went to a website, you got a newspaper, you saw it on TV. Is this news? Yes, right? Okay, I think most of us, let me just see hands. Who agrees this is news? You're more likely to see it somewhere, correct? Anywhere, all right. Is this news? Who says yes? First of all, do you know who these are? Who knows? They're not Kardashians. These are two sisters from, I think from what it says California. They're from California, and I just got the news yesterday. I actually just Googled Kim Kardashian, and I got this. So it says people here, that's the source I got it from, but if you go online now, you'll see lots of other websites, lots of other media organizations that are talking about it. So apparently these are two sisters who look alike, like Kim Kardashian and Kylie Jenner, the two of the most two famous ones in the family, okay? So how many of you say this is news? Yes?
I think if the person is normal person, so whatever he do or does, it's not could be considered as news. But if he has lots of followers, if he's important on social media, I think what he does, even if it's a normal selfie, it could be news for his followers or people who are interested in their news.
Yes, we go again to what we call the news values, correct? That's what the doctor here said, just about what news values are. So if they're related to somebody important, then it makes them news. So again, let me see, who thinks this is news? This is also generational, just to let you know. So only a few, yes? But this is news, right? It's people.com, it's a magazine, and it's on lots of different websites. I don't know, maybe New York Times will cover it, I don't know. So we can see how definition of news is changed. All right, it always changes, we don't know what it is. If you ask me what is news, I would say I don't know, okay? It's so many different things. Now, why does this matter? First of all, before we get to frames, if you go to literature about news, and these are famous, in my lecture, whenever you see all these names, these are research studies or books or academic resources, okay? If you're interested in any one of them, you have my email at the end of the slides, you can always email me, all right? So, all these people are, the big guns in news construction, all of this. They say that, first of all, news is a socially constructed representation of reality. So it's not a reality, but it's a representation of reality. And if you know what representation means, it means something that shows you something else. And it's not just what it is, it's also socially constructed. It means you have lots of things that happen, lots of factors that determine what is news, and most of them are social. That's why what is news to maybe the younger generation about the Kim Kardashian lookalikes and her sister lookalikes is not news to some of the older generations, because we don't think that that is news. We want something more important. But the G20 summit, it was news for most of everybody because it's political, it really dictates what the world will do in the next few years, and so many other factors, correct? So it's also reality-making activity, okay? These scholars have said that news is reality-making activity, so it's not value-free. That's the term that we use. There's nothing that just comes to you, and I do know that few of you already talked about this previously. And basically, it's what the producer of the news says it is, correct? Most of you have worked in journalism or teach journalism or any of the sort, and you know that sometimes you had stories that didn't make it, correct? You wrote stories, didn't make it on TV, didn't make it on the web, didn't make it anywhere. And then because the producer or the editor thought they're not important enough for the day, or on the level of importance, they were maybe number 5. And then the next day, that number 5, you don't have stories, so that number becomes number 1. So all of a sudden, a story about dogs, I don't know, just being cute, would go up to the top because you don't have stories. And if you have worked enough, you know that the news goes in cycles, right? My background is in sports journalism. So on Monday, we had the busiest day. What happens in the weekend in sports? Yes. Okay. رح نوصل لهالشغلة, okay? We will get to this. We have a pretty good chart about that. But anyway, in sports, in the weekend, all the football leagues happen around and everything else that happens. So you know that there are days, middle of the week, Thursday is the worst day. So depending on what I do, where I do my story, it might be the number one if it's on maybe Thursday, but it would not even make it if it's on Thursday. Okay, so you see a lot of different factors influence what we see as news. So now that we know this, and again, I know all of you do already know this, we can talk about facts or truth, correct? How many of you who do teach or remember when you were journalists weren't able to differentiate between facts or truth? Because I think it's very common for new students to always tell me, well, this is the truth. I tell them that there's no truth, right? We usually talk about facts in journalism. Do you agree? Yes, to some extent, right? We talk about facts. Now that we know this, we know facts are what it is. Do you think it's just as simple as knowing a fact and then presenting it and then I'm done as a journalist? Is it still value-free? It's not, right? So how I present a fact, this is what framing is. The way I present information to you dictates how you perceive it. Because I'm telling you, this is the reality that I want you to know. Okay, you turn on the TV, you go to your newsfeed, to your Twitter, to your Instagram or Facebook, and the information that you see there tells you this is what I think is important to you. Okay, we'll also get to how that works and how the news is aggregated. So now we'll go to the focus of the study. Needless to say, I think we all understand how this relates to media literacy. Yes? So knowing how to evaluate opinion and facts and how to differentiate between both, and to know how a fact is coming to you. Is it value-free? Is it just the way it is? That really makes you media literate or not. And I'm pretty sure all of you know people who can't really understand that. Yesterday I was talking with Azza, and I don't know how many of you have heard this, or if you are Lebanese, you've seen it. Some story about the Lebanese being, what was it, Phoenicians or something? Okay, Canaanites, okay? And everybody on Facebook, just a lot of people on Facebook were reposting it and saying, oh, we're Canaanites if we're Lebanese and all of this. I didn't read the story because I thought, oh, that's just another one. Then Azza was telling me yesterday that the sample, so the people they talked to, they were only 100, correct? Only 100 people. If you know a little bit of research, you know 100 is not really a good number to just say an entire, I don't know how many billions of Lebanese are really from that origin. And they also got them from one specific area, and only they were men also, right? Yep. So, but people just posted it and reposted it, and if you're not media literate enough, you tend to read it and say, oh, I'm a Canaanite, and then you go tell another person, and a third, and a fourth, and it just becomes this huge thing. And that's what misinformation is, okay? Again, we talked about fake news, but before fake news, we have something that's called misinformation. How you say something that might not be completely correct. Okay, this is, I don't know if you're familiar with the hierarchy of influences model from Shoemaker and Rees. They're two of the most accomplished and important scholars in media research, okay? They came up with this hierarchy of influences, and it kind of looks like an onion with all the layers on it, and in the middle you have the individuals. The individuals are the people who are producing news, so mainly the journalist, okay? And then it becomes maybe the editor and all of this. So here, when it comes to individuals, what type of things do you think factors influence the type of news that you do? Yes? Before that, you as a human being, me as Claudia, what would influence me to focus on a story? My own personal values, correct? Beliefs, ideologies, social structure, and everything else. And then we have the routine practices. Routine practices refer to how you gather news. Some people are only assigned to the presidential palace. Some people are assigned, if it's the United States, to the White House. Some people are assigned to Congress, all of this. These are their news beats. That's where they go, and then there's a machine of producing news. Every day, tons of news, and you are responsible for coming up with stories. These are called routine practices of news gathering. And then we have media organizations. These are the people that are a little bit above you as a journalist. These are the people who decide. And it's not just one person. These are the people who decide if your story is good or not. Depending on how important it is, it might go up to the top levels, okay? Yesterday you watched a documentary on TV, and there are it highlighted important issues, of course, about sectarianism in the country, and most of these TV stations have at some point, one point or another, not allowed a story that is very just basic to a reporter to go up to the, to go up on air, because it was so sensitive that it just went up and up. So not even your editor, but the person, the higher, the managing editor, and maybe the owner would have to say, let me see this, do I want it on or not? And again, this is not news, you all know this already. So that's the media organization, and then we have social institutions and systems. Social institutions are extra media organizations, okay? So PR, technology, all of these things that do affect, and sources, people who give you news. We love sources, and we rely on them heavily for news. And then we have the social system, which is really the society that you live in. Now you see how one little bit of news, one story that you write, has all of these things to make it news. That's why if the two sisters story might be news for some but not others, and of course it changes from one generation to the other, from one country to another, from one setting to another. Okay, now, if you look at all this, beyond all these layers, you also have this big frame that I have, okay? Framing actually comes from the word frame, to do this for TV, right? It comes from the word frame. The way you look at something dictates how you view that thing. So all of these things combined or individually, each one of them has a frame, so nothing is value-free. So frames are representations. Do you know this space? I presume you should by now, right? Now I'm pretty sure you haven't looked at it from this side, because when you go, we're right here, right? You're right here, and you just go up here to eat or drink. So this space is from the other side. But if you are LAU students or faculty or staff, then you know this view. So I'm trying to capture this, I don't know, do we have a name for it? The square, okay? I'm trying to capture this quad. This is another frame. I'm also capturing this quad, correct? Yeah? Is it different? It is. Can someone tell me you're not capturing this quad, the quad? I'm not. Is it pretty? I think it's ugly. The photographers here would tell us that it's not that, or maybe see ugly for me is ugly for others, might be art, I don't know. But the point is that I'm looking at the same thing from a different view. What about this? This is also the quad, and it's from my office. This is the view I get of the quad from my office. It looks different. This is the prettiest picture when I had to zoom in to get it. It's also the quad, but it makes it look more lively, and you have some people walking, and there's the tree, the shade, the proportions are somehow better. Okay, can someone tell me that none of these, or not all these pictures are of the quad? No? Do you see how I can present a fact to you with my own frame, and each one of them tells you something about it, doesn't it? Okay. Now, these are the same photo, the same frame. What is the difference between them? The focus. Here I'm focusing on this flower, the tree, and the background is blurry, and here I'm focusing on the background and the flower is blurry. There's a difference, but they're the same thing. So what you highlight, what you focus on, dictates what you present to the people. So what does this all mean in the media? Why are we talking about frames? And why does it matter that media present frames? So what? I mean, who cares, right? I mean, the media will tell you this is a story. You can just choose it or not choose it, take it or not, accept it or not. It doesn't matter. I can just tell you, give you information about, I don't know, Trump is amazing or Trump is bad. Who cares? Yes? This projector is wow.
Framing
Where
means,
can I go? Yes.
Framing means that I want to show the people what I think is important, what I see,
Yes.
and not what they want or what they see,
Yes.
or what they should see.
That's correct. So why is it wrong?
I believe that media has a bigger
Roles?
role,
Goals.
in life. It's just not presenting the news or transforming it to people. It's also having awareness, and it influences actually people's life in all the ways. So when you are a journalist, you have a responsibility. You're just not publishing this like randomly. So you have a responsibility towards the society and the world as well.
All right. Yes.
عندما نؤطر للخبر أو عندما يكون هناك تأطير لابد أن تكون يعني بالجانب الآخر هناك إخفاء جزء من الحقيقة. كل تأطير هناك جزء أو إخفاء جزء من الحقيقة.
Okay. Yes, this is actually a very good explanation of it, because this is one of the ways that the scholars also present it. So it's just highlighting one aspect and not the other one. Okay, so now we know why it's not good, as in because you're presenting something to someone, telling them this is how I want you to get it. Any other thoughts? Yes.
فهم الخبر أو تأثير الخبر علينا بيختلف باختلاف السياق اللي بينوضع فيه أو الزاوية اللي بتتناولها فيها الوسيلة الإعلامية تبعنا السياسة التحريرية، واللي هي بنقول نحن الأخبار بتمثل جزء من الواقع بس ما بتنقل الواقع كله مثل ما هو. بتركز على جزء واحد منه بس.
Okay, also correct, and this is also something we talk about. So the main reason why we care how the media present information or how they frame is because of consumption. Yes? Because we are consuming it. That's why all these stories about violence or whatever has to do with kids, good stories, bad stories, even with us, it's just because it will affect us. So mostly everything we do, I don't like to say everything in an absolute term because there is nothing absolute, but the majority of the things that we do and we care about in media is because of media effects, okay, how they influence us. The reason we do research, the reason we teach, and you were talking about here, talking about socially responsible journalists, correct? And then social responsible because we want to present information in the best way possible because people will be and might be, okay, not necessarily, but might be affected by it. So this whole thing, everything we do in media and in journalism is because we believe people will be affected. So we want to do our absolute best to it. Okay, so some of the little bit of heavy terminology, I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Frames are important because they affect how consumers learn, okay? Not learn as in you learn something, but know of. How consumers know of or hear of news, how they analyze and interpret these news, okay? And how they evaluate that information. All of these things, the frames, whatever people do, all of these things that they do are dictated by how the frame works and what it gives you. So, journalists organize their stories in frames before they present them. We just talked a little bit now about how we want to present information, and then we said that media organizations have ulterior motives, correct? Most of them do. We all know their ulterior motives would be, there are mainly two big things. One is, the lower one would be ideology, correct? Religious or political and or both. But the most important one would be money, okay? Everything, Yes, everything has to do with money, okay? And that's one of the main criticisms of the US model, and then how they were saying that, oh, ours is better because we don't have government control. But then some of the theories who criticize this, they say, well, you don't have government control, but you have monetary control. And we've already talked about in MDLAB about media conglomerates. So, see, the journalists do give you facts, okay? We're not arguing about that. They give you facts, but they also give you the frames in which to look at. So I'm giving you the glasses. I can't see very well. I'm not blind. I can see very well far. So if you give me something without my glasses, I won't be able to read it. I think I can see who's sitting there, but without them, no. So whatever you give people, and even my frames, they're a little bit of green and blue on the sides, give me a different view. So if you give someone, rose-tinted glasses, you tend to see the world in a different way, and this is what journalists do. Now, I do have a question about, how many of you have worked or do work in journalism, producing stories? Okay, in any capacity, as editors or any type. Okay, so we have a lot. Just think, and you don't have to answer, I don't want to force you, but if you would love to, I would love to hear it. Has any one of you, or those who really believe deep down they are value-free, as in they're not trying to push anything, they're truly deeply honest about wanting to give their best and wanting to be socially responsible journalists and giving whatever they can to the public? How many of you really believe you are like that, deep down? I think a lot of journalists and people who work do. Now, do you think the stories that you produce are actually value-free? They're not, because you are a human being, right? You have your own, you tried, definitely. That's the difference between knowing, about ethics and about different, being socially, more aware of what's going on. But whatever we do, that's why the term objectivity that we used to use so much in the media is almost out. Nobody ever really wants to use the term objectivity anymore, because we all realize there's nothing called objectivity. Just because you can try your best, but because we're looking at things from different points of view, okay? So my reality is different than your reality. So again, the quad that we saw, that square, that is the same square. Each one of you would present it in a different way. It doesn't make one wrong or right, it just makes it different, okay? So however we try, even if our media organizations do have their ulterior motives, we don't have any, and we do believe we don't, you would still inject something, just the way you present your story. We'll go to Robert Entman in 1993. He's one of the most well-cited and often cited theories about framing research, okay? This is exactly, and I've probably seen this, if you've read anything about framing, you know that you've seen this, this quote hundreds and thousands of times. He tells you to frame is to select. We've already here mentioned this, correct? Is to select some aspect. So if you look at every word, I don't want to go into the detail, I think we can all understand. You're only picking some aspects, not all of them, of a perceived reality. See, it's not just a reality, it's a perceived one, which means it's the way you see it. It's your own paradigm that dictates how you understand that reality. And make them more salient, as in highlight them, put the projector on them, just make them more important in a communicating text in such a way as to promote, and then the rest is kind of a methodological approach of how you can actually do research in framing, okay? So he says all of these, the way any story you present, any article, any paragraph, any one sentence, sometimes one word, we'll see now, one word could be a frame, okay? All right, let me now move a little bit to research and tell you some of the approaches that we do. If any one of you is interested in research or you've done it, then you would find this useful. If not, you could also try to relate it to your own work in the media, okay? The background is, comes from, Goffman is the first person to talk about it in 1974. He said something about frames is something we do in reality, it's just how we organize information. And then we have Gamson, Kahneman, and Tversky. These are very important people, one of the first people to talk about it. It's very popular in economics, in psychology, in sociology, and of course in media and political science. All right, all of these things make framing very popular. It's the most used theoretical structure in journalism and in the media. We have two types of approaches on how you do it: the qualitative and a quantitative one. I'll just briefly talk about those. But I do want to to just highlight one thing. When I talk about theory, I know some of you understand it as something that's up in the air, that's theoretical, as in, oh, it doesn't, you're just telling us something. That's not what this theory is. I don't know in Arabic if you can differentiate. So this has nothing to do with the theoretical and the practical type of theory. This is just a structure that you can study, you can apply to research so you can build on it. All right, that's what I mean by theory. In quantitative, we do a lot of content analysis when we analyze media content, and we use statistical tools to see what frames are. And framing research is also important in experiments. They do a lot of experiments to see how people are affected by it. That's the media effect side. And if we do qualitative research, we do textual analysis. It's similar to content analysis, but looks at it from a qualitative perspective. So you approach your topic just not knowing what to get, and then you organize the information. And we also have critical discourse analysis, is when you're going beyond the text, beyond the ideology. You're going to understand what the text means, and how it's, how you understand it as a human being. And I have some examples. So, I don't think a lecture would pass by without a picture of Trump, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the source I got it from. Oopsie. Anyway, so if you don't know who this person is and you only look at this photo, do you think you will like him? You will not, right? You don't know who this person is. You look at this photo. He looks nice, right? You're too biased, right? So much information in your mind. Simple point is that simple semiotics. Semiotics is the study of signs, and how, I think all of you know that you see a photo, especially in advertising. They just have a girl standing like this, but then she's selling something completely different than what she's doing. So that's one of the ways we do framing research. You can just look at actual frame, of course. Again, if you know anything about photography or photojournalism, if you take someone from the bottom, it looks like that person is more dominant. If it's from the top, and this is especially important for teenagers, and there was some type of research on it for their Facebook profiles a couple of years ago. So whenever you take your photos from up, and the way your eyes look at the camera, it could relay more of a sexually oriented look. You're trying to seduce someone. So the way you look, you're looking up or you're looking down, matters. So very simple details do tell you what the person is trying to convey. Let me just stop here to tell you there's research that showed, it's very interesting because they did an experiment on framing, and they showed people the way, I can't remember exactly, but they manipulated the photos in a way of candidates. They said, okay, this is a candidate, for example, in your municipality, okay? You have 10 candidates. They made them look like the person who was looking at them, okay? So if I'm going, I'm clicking on, on this experiment, and I see someone, the person would look like me, as in, I don't know, I guess has curly hair, she's a woman, maybe has glasses on. And then guess what people did? They chose people who look like them. Okay, so that's a very simple tweak to the photo that made people choose it. So very, very, very minor details could change the way you interpret information. And then we have something called linguistic devices. So something that has to do with language. This is also a type of research, mainly in the critical discourse analysis area, where you look at things. So do you know, I don't know what it is in Arabic, do you know the difference between active voice and passive voice? Yes? So in English, there are two examples. In English, it's always about the cat and the mouse, right? The cat ate the mouse. So someone did something to someone. And then the passive voice would be, the mouse was eaten by the cat. Who is more important in the second sentence? The mouse, okay? In Arabic, it's always, I remember, أكل الولد التفاحة. Yes? Yes, but we don't have the passive, but you understand. So, active and passive voice, I don't know how many times have you thought of the way you use language is actually a frame, okay? Look at these two examples. If you say the police attacked the crowd, and then you say the crowd was attacked, what is the difference? It's very simple, of course, but Do you understand how one simple way of writing, for you, if you're not that into this and you don't understand all this, you could just simply understand it as it's just a style of writing, correct? I mean, I've learned about active voice and passive voice when I was in, I don't know, middle school maybe. I never thought that it's actually a frame, but the way you present that sentence is actually a frame. And then we have names and descriptors. If you say 2 Arab youths were caught with guns, or you say 2 young men were caught with guns, there's a big difference, right? Again, are you lying here? And the second one, if you say 2 young men, you're not. Are you telling an untruth? Whatever truth you want it to be? No. Is this real? It's a reality. Is this real? Also a reality. Also in the first one, are you lying? You're not. Is it a fact? It is. It's just what you highlight. If you remember Entman's definition, it's the part of the frame that you, the fact, the aspect that you highlight makes it different for people. And then, oh, sorry, we don't have the last one. I don't know why it looks like this. And then this is one of my favorites, a concept or even a noun, one word. Global warming and climate change. We've heard of these words. Okay, I don't know in Arabic if there's a difference between them, but do we know what party in the US goes with what? We have the Republican mainly, and we have the Democratic Party. Global warming, who supports global warming? The Democrats. It's not, they don't. It's climate change, because global warming has to do with, right now, there's something that's going on. The earth is getting warmer. Climate change includes what also? Everything else that's happening. So it's much bigger. So Democrats push for climate change. So whenever you're reading a story, you see the word climate change or global warming, you don't think twice about it, correct? Before I read this research, I didn't know. I just thought they're the same thing. You're just saying them in a different way, correct? But you're not. You're pushing an agenda. And again, lots of research studies have looked at this, and they look at Twitter, they look at network analysis, and they see nods, and it's amazing, amazing how you can see the political parties, especially around the elections, the words that they keep pushing. And they're so amazingly clear. You have the blue and you have the red. And all these words that they do, they don't. So these words are something that they, you know, they're trying to tell you something without you knowing. And then the last one is baby or fetus. The difference between baby and fetus, I think this is easier. It has to do with pro-life and pro-choice. So it has to do with who supports abortion and who doesn't. So if you're writing a story and you say, the woman with the baby had to abort, okay? Or you say, the woman with the fetus had to abort, which one is more human to you? The baby, because you see it as a baby. The fetus is just a biological, right, scientific word that you don't connect with. One has emotional words. So we see now how you can do framing research, or you can look at it from a sentence perspective, even from a word perspective, and you can map these to find results. You can also do it as a story structure. Okay, I think all of you, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna learn this more when you do your data visualization sessions, and if you've taken any type of visual-related infographic sessions, and I know here at LAU we teach that in media and society, all of these things, the way you present your story also tells you something. The first one is the headline, correct? The headline, if it's big, if it's too loud, if it's just saying something, you're going to click on it. That's the clickbait part that, again, ties to probably fake news, correct? So don't worry about these. I have some of these big words just in case somebody is interested. But Pan and Kasiki, they came up with these 4 different ways to do it: syntactical and rhetorical structures, the script structures, and the thematic structures. So the way you present your information, the sources that you use, the expertise of your sources, if you say that or not, okay? You could have, you know, if you watch TV, then you have someone's name, and at the bottom, it's that person, correct? It's that person and what that person does, depending on what part of what you do, if the network puts it or not matters. And again, I'll refer back to the documentary yesterday and about Lebanese television. One of the things that was in the documentary was when some of the people are not invited to certain TVs, correct, because of their political background. Actually, it's a little bit further than that. They are. But what happens is they're so cornered in a way they don't want to do it anymore. So there are TV stations who want to invite someone from the opposite party, from the opposite religion that they hate. They want to invite them, but that person doesn't want to come. So it looks like the TV is biased and doesn't want to do it. Or the TV invites that person is nice enough to go, but they attack them and you saw the chairs flying around and all of that, correct? So you see, it's how you present the information. Even if you get to sources, you put the source, it's how you present it. I'll share with you a small example, and I don't want to put it here because I don't want to give details. I was interviewed recently about a TV station in the United States. I was interviewed as an expert to give my expertise, not my opinion about it. So I did my own, it's something that I do, it's one of the classes that I teach, so I know about it. I said, okay, fine, why not? So I gave the information. I still have the Word document, I emailed it. And then the newspaper the article comes out, and I'm just shocked. I looked like that emoji with the big eyes. And I trust the journalist, and I know the journalist is good, but I'm thinking, wow, out of everything I said, you chose that part that makes me look like I'm mad and I hate them. I don't. It's just when you take a sentence out of context and you put it somewhere, and where you put it, you put one person who is pro this TV, the other person who is against, and then there's me, or there's me, or there's me. Do you see where you put the information matters? Again, if you're interested in gender studies or any type of research, you see plenty of them tell you that women are usually never cited in the beginning of a paragraph. That's the lead, okay? So again, where you put the information, how you present the information. Plus, I was introduced, of course, as assistant professor, and then later on I was called Miss Kozman. If you see a story from a Miss, or from a doctor, or from a Mr., or from a Mrs., that changes something, right? You tend to believe that someone has more expertise if they're if that person is an expert in it. I talked to fourth graders at one of the schools here at IC. I talked to them a little bit about fake news and how they can, when they get information, because they know a lot about the internet, that's what they do. So, we talked about how you can get information. So I just showed them a small slide. I said, okay, you're sick, and then you have something going on. Who would you go to? There's a crying baby, and there's a mother, and there's a doctor, okay? Who would you go to? They all said, well, of course we'll go to the doctor. I'm like, why? Because he's an expert, okay? So small details, again, do dictate how you perceive the information. Now, before we go on to the last part of the actual studies and maybe the cooler stuff of how framing works, I want to talk about sourcing, okay? Sources are sacred in journalism. Everything we do is sources. I want to say something, I don't want to say it because I'm not supposed to say my opinion, so I'll just get someone to say it. Now, do you think that's value-free? All right, all of you who said that we truly, and myself, I do believe that I tried my best to be very direct as a journalist, but the people I talk to do shape my story, right? And actually, they're one of the biggest, most important shapers of your story. And source diversity affects the frames, the way people see them, and also media credibility. Okay, that's one study when they looked at BuzzFeed. We all know BuzzFeed, correct? It's what color you are, how tall you are, what jeans you like to wear, blah, blah. And then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the New York Times. And people see credibility differently because of the type of sources that you use. Okay, at least in the last few years, I haven't looked at BuzzFeed recently, but most of the time, if they cover a story, it was very interesting. I should have taken a screenshot. They have this sentence that says, the sources could not be reached for comment. I don't know if you noticed that. They always say, you look at the same story in the New York Times, well, the sources did talk to the New York Times. So the more you build your sources, the more you diversify them. This is again how radical a media organization could be. If you mix your sources, if you only go to women, only go to men, only go to kids, only go to a certain party or religion, has something to say about you get your information. Now we'll go to conflict. Okay, we'll talk about research and conflict and how the media frame it. I don't know if you're familiar with the word infotainment, but it's been coined, I believe, from Daniel Boorstin in the 1990s, early 1990s. It's mainly the way the media, TV mainly, presents information as entertainment, so that's the word infotainment, okay? And also wars in the media have been sensationalized, okay? Whatever looks cool, whatever looks, has too much blood in it, and that's what we want to use. There's of course a lot of conflict, and it's been trivialized, okay? If I ask you now, we'll get to these photos in a second. If I ask you, what is your, okay, let me ask you, what do you see somebody says war in the media? What is the first kind of image that would come to your mind? Any type of story, picture, anything in the media that has to do with war. Syria, okay. Weapons, sure. We'll get to that. Hold that thought, okay? So victims, she said victims, and then destruction, a lot of that, okay? And if you look too much into it, if you notice, most of it has to do with conflict, correct? Now it makes sense. It's very relaxing music. Conflict makes sense because war is really about conflict, correct? It's two people, two sides, two countries who hate each other. Now, is there another way to present a war? That's not conflict? Let me see, what do you remember? A story about a war that's not about conflict. Yes? Okay, so helping, this is a human interest frame, correct? It's when you highlight the humanity, the humane part of people. Do you see that often? Do you see that a lot? Yeah. They were important when the US Army was helping the Iraqis, correct? Or even now, you know, someone from from American or British troops just holding a little girl or just smiling. These are common ones. They're all propaganda. Yep. What else? What other ways can we present war? Excuse me? Patriotism. Okay, so in pictures or in words, maybe someone holding a flag. Correct, yes, it's us winning. It was a big, big, big deal during the Vietnam War, of course. Yes. Okay, parades. This was a big deal for the Communist Party. This is actually, and also during the Nazi era, it's just how you present, you know, people just walking around in big chunks and just very uniform. And actually the Soviet countries used to adopt the same exact strategy to present sports. That was exactly what they did because they wanted to push an image and they did it through sports. It's just that we are very uniform and we do it. Come on, what else? What other ways? Yes. Families, okay, yes. Same, families, okay. Yes, yes, the families of their soldiers, correct? So that's the way they want to frame it. That happened when they wanted the troops to come back. Before that, it wasn't a lot of it. This photo is from the 1992 US, when the US troops went to Somalia for aid. Okay, and this particular photo is important because it's from AP, and I got it from BBC. It was a big mess because somehow the media knew they were coming and they were waiting for them on the beach. And then they came with all these cameras. You see these cameras, and they were mad because their cover was blown. So they wanted to attack the Somalis or do all of this. They couldn't do it. So that was a big mess in how, you know, in media and war and government relations when it comes to war. So the idea, the media didn't care much about whether the US would win or not, whatever. They really wanted to get their shot. And that was the best photo op ever. And then this is the NATO bombing, all right, of Yugoslavia in 1991. It was also a big opportunity for TV to just present all this information. I have a YouTube video, but I don't think we have time right now, so we'll watch it in a little bit, okay? Let me move on to some of the research papers that I've done with my colleague and some other ones about the Arab region and how they framed conflict. Some of these are about traditional media, but some of them are also about new and social media. This study by Silcock and colleagues analyzed 2,500 images of war in US media, and guess how many of them showed injury and death? Only 10% of them. And if you look at them, who are the people that are being injured mostly? On TV, everywhere you look, it was the US and coalition troops, okay? So the fact that an American or a British soldier is injured is much more important than Iraqi civilians. And if we know about war, for the most part, who is really affected by war? It's the people, right? And now we'll see one research after another that we don't have. The people are not presented, they're not visible. Who is visible? Depending on the country you're coming from and the media that the country represents. So you can see here, I guess it's pretty easy to know the percentages of how they did it. Iraqi troops are non-existent on TV. That's amazing, in the internet and in the newspapers, only in news magazines. Okay, all the soldiers that died, they were not existent. My colleague and I, again, we can't see it, but my colleague and I, and we are not related. I know we have similar names, but we come from two different countries and continents too. We did 3 studies on Syria and the war, okay, 3 different ones. This one we did on the chemical attacks that happened in Damascus in 2013. So we looked at 1 month of coverage in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Okay, we wanted to see how American media, legacy media, traditional top-level media framed the war. And we looked at, again, all of these have numbers, but don't worry about them. If you are interested and you know how to interpret the statistics, you can do that. If not, then it's not important, okay? So these are the type of people that they used as sources, okay? We go back to the idea of sources and frames and how they're related to each other. So we have Obama and we have all the other ones. Now the significant ones are the US officials. Okay, there was a big difference between how they looked at it. But here, the difference is not that important because they're both US media, okay? We were looking at something else. But you see the percentage and how low it is of certain types of people. Okay, let me move on to the other study where we looked at the same time, okay, but we added Lebanese newspapers and we added 2 opposing newspapers, one pro-Syria, one anti-Syria, okay, to see how they would differ. So they were As-Safir and Al-Mustaqbal, okay? One of them is pro and one of them is not. So here we looked at the frames. I asked you what type of frames we see. We all said conflict. Have you thought of the responsibility, the morality, economic consequences frame? Do you know how much wars cost? I'm not a military strategist, but I've heard and I've seen a lot of stories about the huge, I mean, it's one of the biggest budgets. Anybody know? It's one of the biggest budgets that a government uses. It's on the war. And most of the problems happen because of these budgets, okay? Look at how many, the percentage of stories, okay, in both that actually look at the economic consequences of the war. Barely there. The most important ones are frames and they're the same. So 2 different styles, 4 different newspapers, 2 different countries, and they both focus on the conflict frame. And then there's the responsibility frame. Responsibility frame is about how you present the information and if you're blaming someone or you're saying someone can actually fix it. Okay, I don't want to, we don't have time to go into the details of the Lebanese stories, but it was interesting the way As-Safir and Al-Mustaqbal looked at the stories, and of course one would blame, if you're pro-Syria, then you would blame the US and the others, and or the rebels and extremists, and if you are anti-Syria, then you would pray Assad and his regime, okay? And then morality as in this is immoral, we can't do this, you know, something about your basic human rights, it's not there. And human interest is what Dr. here was saying, when you see people helping each other or you look into details. Do you see now how there are ways to cover a story, and the one we all know of is conflict. I don't know if most of you are shy, I hope not, but I barely got any answers correct when I asked you about any other frame you present. You see, they exist, but we don't have them. And I'm sure you can find other ways to also present the information. That's the same study. Here we look at the type of officials that they use. Okay? The US stories look at the percentage of stories that had officials in them, okay, US officials. And then the Lebanese stories had only 15%. International officials were not a big deal for the US media, but they were a huge deal. Mainly they were UN people and also Iran and Saudi Arabia. A lot of officials from Iran and Saudi Arabia and the UN because of As-Safir and Al-Mustaqbal and who they cite, okay? You see the differences. Now, where are we? There you go. US Syrian citizens, the ones who are actually dying. Do you see the percentages? How low? Barely, barely, barely. Any story talks about the citizens. So that's why we don't have human interest frames, you don't have morality frames. And other sources that was interesting because some of the Lebanese celebrities just always talking about, I don't know for what reason, they were talking about some of these issues. This is a third paper where we only looked at New York Times and An-Nahar, okay? And here we wanted to see how media use social media, okay? Now we know there's another study about Egypt, you'll see it now. You'll see how, everybody talked about the Twitter revolution. Have you heard of that word? YouTube revolution. All of these revolutions mean something to one country that happened in. There's a YouTube, the Facebook revolution, and the Twitter revolution. None of those are actual 100% social media related ones. But no matter what they are, we wanted to see how the media actually use them. And they don't use them a lot, okay? Social media sources, the rebels, there was a difference between both of them, but mainly forget about the difference, if it's significant or not. Just look at the numbers. Again, you would think if social media, one of the biggest, pluses or advantages about new media and digital media is that we as people can use it, correct? That we don't need to have to belong to an organization. So you would think that all these people tweeting and posting and doing all these things about the war in Syria and here we looked at 5 years. So we started on the day it started and we ended it when we had to actually end it so we could write our paper, okay? So we covered 5 years and the thousands of stories you imagine were about Syria. Only, I don't have the number here, only about 200 were used Twitter and Facebook. That's how low the numbers are. So media still don't use them. So out of all the people who would talk, they still went to officials to use them as social media. The Lebanese case was interesting because Saad al-Hariri was very active on Twitter. So sometimes a story would just be, when he was prime minister, the story would just be, his tweet. And also Walid Jumblat is also another person who was active on Twitter. That's how it's kind of biased for some officials. Do you see now how the people that we use, the sources that you interview, and we're taught and we teach our students to just go to officials, go to these people, correct? Do you see how they can slant your story, give you a different perspective than you know? This is a frame. When you write your stories, there are certain ways you think about it. In academia, in literature, it tells you it could be an institutionally managed one, which means the president holds a press conference. You as a journalist, do you have a choice? You have to go and cover. Who really created the story? He did, correct? Now, event-driven ones are when there's an event and you have to cover it. For example, there's an earthquake or there's a bomb, okay? And reporter-driven ones, these are the ones that we want to have more of. That's when you create your story and you analyze it. These are the long stories, the thematic ones that look at an issue from a bigger perspective. Okay? And you see in the war, mainly they were event-driven and institutionally managed ones. Okay? Very few articles actually talked about how, talked about the whole issue of the war instead of just covering this bomb was hit this place and then that many people died and we're done. Okay? The difference here, it's not significant, which means that both of them did it the same way. Okay? It's not, if you see the numbers 52 here and 42 there, it doesn't mean that they're different. They actually, from a statistical perspective, they're the same. And this is a study about Egypt, okay, from one of the famous papers from Hamdi and Gomha. They looked at those other the frames, and they looked at official governmental or government-related newspapers, and they looked at independent newspapers, and they looked at social media. Look how interesting this is. Conflict. Do you see? Big percentage here. And then do you see here? 0. So when people use or talk about in the media, social media, they don't even talk about conflict. What are they talking about? Responsibility. And also human interest is huge. Most of the people who were talking about Egypt, they were talking, the social media people. We can't tell here if social media means actual citizens or not, but we will believe that during at least Egypt, there was a lot of actual people tweeting, yes.
أن الأشخاص يركزون على هذين الجانبين أو الإطارين وليس على إطار النزاع.
Reporter-driven is when you're sitting somebody, okay, investigative stories are reporter-driven, or when you're writing a story that is not related to one thing. For instance, so a story, something happens, and then you cover it as a journalist, you don't have a choice. You write it. The president met with his, with his friends, and he ate dinner, and they partied, and then we're done. That's it. You don't have a choice, you have to cover it. Or he held a press conference, and he said this, and these are the things that happened. An event-driven one, if maybe somebody fell and broke his or her leg in it. A reporter-driven one where you just sit back and say, okay, what does this mean? Let me look at a story from a different angle and give my own perspective. These are the bigger, longer stories. Usually you see them in magazines. Analysis, yes, when you analyze it, okay? So these are the thematic ones where you look at a story and you look at the larger issue. And these are the really good ones because you sit and you do, and that's when you can choose, and you see a lot of it. We don't have that much, yes. Enterprise, yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, so these are the reporter-driven ones are also in academia known as enterprise stories, so the ones that the reporter creates, and these are the thematic ones. Shanto Iyengar talks about frames, and they could be episodic and thematic. Episodic is when you present an issue and you say, okay, there's a bomb here, and that many people died, and that's it. You see stories like this, right? And then you see a story, okay, what does it mean? And then when you go into what does it mean, you're going into a theme, into a bigger one. That's when, if you do, they've done so many experiments. It's a very famous book, it's called News Matters. Okay, it's from 1991 from Iyengar. This is where he actually comes up with this framework. When they do an experiment, him and his colleagues, you see how people tend to understand it better. So there are frames, of course, but still when you present an issue as a one-time thing, you just tend to believe it. To believe it's just not important. Somebody fell, who cares? But if you look at somebody fell, what does this mean? It means the roads we have are not good. It means this and that. That's when. But these stories are rare because they take a lot of resources and a lot of time. That's another problem that we have these days with the fast media environment where everything has to be done quick. Okay? Even the biggest news organizations make lots of mistakes. I'm kind of a grammar type of Nazi. I just go into grammar to see if somebody made a mistake with that or which. Is it right? Is it wrong? Even the biggest ones make all these mistakes, because they don't really want to waste that one extra minute to proofread because they want to be the first on it, okay? Does this answer your question? Yes? Okay, all right. Anyway, and then these are the frames that they want to leave time for questions. These are the frames that they use. So in the governmental newspapers, they framed the Egyptian situation as a conspiracy on the Egyptian state, okay? Of course, and they warned of the economic consequences, that there will be a problem and social and responsibility of chaos. In the social media, it was a revolution for freedom and social justice. See how the different frames, how media present their issues in different frames, and then independent newspapers did both. Yes. They don't mention it in the paper, or maybe they do. I will, if you want, you can talk to me afterwards and we'll go into the details. They just call them social media. Okay?
No, I mean you analyzed the social media accounts of the officials.
No. That's not my study. This is from Hamdi and Goma. Okay, but I do have the paper and I will look it up for you, okay? They just call them social media. Somewhere they would tell you what type of social media accounts there are. And very quickly, do you remember the Abu Ghraib prison scandal with the US? This is one of my absolute favorite studies because it's so simple and it's so meaningful. The authors look at Jones and Sheets, look at US and international media, 7 international media, some of them pro-US, some of them not so much, okay? And they looked at the use of the term torture, okay? What did they find? That US media tended not to use the word torture because doing that means and they also use framing and social identity theory. Social identity theory, it's a really interesting one that tells you how you identify. Again, when we go to the onion, they don't call it an onion, I just call it an onion. With the one with the layers and the frames, your own personal frame comes into this. They couldn't, most of the American journalists were not, or the editors were not able to use the word torture when they talk about what the US military, the army did, or some of the, military did in Abu Ghraib. Why wouldn't they do that? Because if they do, it tells them, this is who we are, right? And they just couldn't do it without even knowing. So again, when we talk about we want to be good, but sometimes some things happen kind of outside of our control in our subconscious. And when they looked at the foreign stories, the ones that were anti, they did use the word torture. Okay, the countries that didn't really care about the US and what the US thinks, they did use the word torture. The countries that were pro-US, they did not use. So something, again, as simple as a word could mean a lot. I think I will skip this because it's a little detailed. Kajatori, Sheffield, and Iyengar have come up with this new way of doing framing research. They map how framing effects have worked, or theories in the media have worked from the 1920s when they started up to now. And they said now, because of social media, because of Facebook, because of Twitter, the way we present information and the way we do research and measure effects has to change. They've come up with something called preference-based effects model, something that is tailor-made. So what does it count on? Look at this and tell me if you think it makes sense. It does to me. So preference-based reinforcement tells you that the media tailor, okay, they fix the information to give you based on the audience, and they can do that in a fragmented world, okay? So they can target the individual and the public, okay? Knowing what you're selling, what your audience is, you can do that now easier, much easier than the newspaper, because you can simply just tweak it. Go to CNN or go to CNN.com and go to CNN International, you'll see the big difference. Again, lots of research on that, how they present violence or not, the images. It also depends on, we've heard about, Sustain talks about echo chambers, and we also know about the filter bubbles, correct? How the way you surround yourself, and this is the worst, I know it happened to me on Facebook before the elections, because everybody I guess I know is mainly somehow of a higher level, academic or people who are educated, so they had a certain way of looking at the Trump or the Hillary situation. So I really was shocked when Trump was elected, and me and all my colleagues in academia, and we said, well, we kind of fell into this filter bubble thing. The people we know were so limited. And then, of course, the search engines, okay? When you go to Google, again, it doesn't mean this is really pure. Even Google fixes it for you. And of course, about Facebook and the newsfeed that you get. We've already seen all that. Okay? Yes, we're done. This is another study that looks at radicalization and extremism in the digital age. They look at so many different they use so many different methodologies, and they said that war and conflict are mediatized, which means they're not mediated. Mediated means they use the media to give you information. Mediatized, according to Awan and his colleagues or her colleagues, I'm not sure. It's just that they depend on the media. They're so important. And of course, we all know about how extremism works and how they really use social media. They looked at a few anti-West forums about and how jihadi discourses were framed, and the way people talk, they framed it as a global attack on Islam, okay, but the Zionist Crusader Alliance. They looked at other ones and they said the media, does this mean I have to stop now? Okay. The media framed this as a global risk, so they scared people. So it was the way they framed the whole issue about extremism and radicalization is just a lot of fear, okay, and risk, and there's something going on, so just panic. And finally, when they interviewed people, they understood that their own concept of what radicalization means and extremism means is very uncertain, and it relates to the uncertainty that this term is used in the media. So when we talk about effects and how we go back to the first slide, what is news, what are frames, and how one thing relates to the other, you'll see how the chain works, and it comes down to you and the way you think and act as an individual and the way you relay information. And I am done. Just a few things if you want, okay? I usually have my students just write down the things that they took from the session. You can just do that if you want, share it. Okay, and I'm done. I didn't think I could talk for an hour, 15 minutes, but I guess I can. So this is my email address. Please don't ask me on Facebook, because I don't like to mix Facebook. Facebook is a little bit more personal, and I don't like to mix it. Also, you have my email. You can ask me any questions you want. All right. So I guess we have 5 minutes for questions. Yes.
أحد أشكال التأطير ذكرتيها إنه
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
أحد أشكال التأطير اللي ذكرتيها إنه الصحفي ممكن يشيل جملة من سياق معين ويحطها بالسياق اللي بيخدم هدفه. هذا يعتبر أخلاقي بالصحافة؟
This would be unethical, okay? But again, ethics are not set rules. Okay, this is one of the issues we have in journalism, that ethics are moving. You know, what ethical is to you is ethical to another one. There's a book about surveying journalists, of course. All the surveys of journalists talk about ethics, and you'll see how they differ. And one of them it's by Pintac. It's not too new, but it's not that old, and it looks at the Arab countries and what ethics is to them. This, for me, would be unethical, yes. Is it a frame? Absolutely. Again, anything you do is a frame. That's how you can present it. But before we get to a frame, it would be completely wrong to just take that. And you can be sued, actually. It's also illegal if they catch you. If you have the proof, that could be illegal depending on where you are. Yes?
I didn't get the difference between conflict and war in media regarding photos, regarding what to write. Like sometimes when you want to cover the humanitarian part, we focus on people, we focus on AIDS, and it differs from...
Yes. Well, there's not much of a difference, because we use the term war, depends on how the countries are framing it. They call it war or not. Before it becomes a real war, we kind of usually call it a conflict. But it's really just a personal choice. You can do whatever. I usually, in my research, try to call it conflict as much as possible, because I don't know what, if you go to political science, I don't know what they would call a war or not, okay? So you can, the way I use it here, I use them interchangeably, okay? Some of them have become war, some of them have not become. I'm sure if we ask now what happened in Syria, some people would say it's a war, some people would say it's a conflict. The Lebanese war lasted all these, years. Is it a conflict? Is it a war? It could be. So it's just really, at least in my lecture, it's just using the words interchangeably. Any questions? Yes.
Do you think that everyone in the society makes framing? I mean, not only journalists, but at the same time, do you think that journalists who do framing really should be professional, but they cannot avoid framing? This is one thing. The other thing you mentioned about the ideology and money and interest. Do you think that the aim and the target is interest, and the ideology serves interest?
For that, you'll have to go to the individual media outlet and see what their policies are. Some of the mostly very highly political ones would go into the political part, but they also have, maybe they have their own money, okay? So let's say Fox News is very political, right? But it's also driven by money. Some of the other ones, the example that we saw about CBS, they have their political leanings, but they really cared about money more for that, okay? So it depends on where you are. I'm sure just what I know of Lebanese media at least, some of them would be more concerned about political ideology and pushing that. Now, at the end of the day, they need money. But what happens is, and that's another problem that feeds into partisanship and sectarianism in Lebanese media, is that they have their own people to give them that money. Okay, if I support as a media organization, I'm owned by politician A, I support politician A, then politician A will give me money. So you see, they don't need to go outside the politician for the money part, so they get it. But still, we have stations and media outlets who have supported some, but then they just cannot, they still don't have money and they folded. So depending on what is what. Did I answer your first question? The second one. The first one was? Sorry.
I said that
if we can escape framing?
Yeah, everybody is doing.
Well, you know what? The simple answer is no. Because it just happens, just the way we are as people. The reason we have this, the MDLAB and everything we do here is mainly really to raise awareness so you know how to evaluate. I do hope that after this, if you didn't know about all this, if you did, then you didn't get much. You understand the simple choice that you make as a journalist, as a researcher, as an academic, as anybody, as a simple person in society. It matters. That one word that you use that you thought doesn't mean anything. It means something. The way you put your information. Okay, we don't learn a lot of these things when we're studying journalism. So we can't escape them. It's just how, when you are aware of something, it's how you perceive that information and how you can evaluate it, okay, and also how you can produce it. This is why we do this, right? Media literacy is all about understanding this message that somebody is giving you and being able to evaluate it instead of saying, we go back to that first the study about Lebanese being Canaanites, just people not even knowing what's in there and they just accept it and they disseminate it, okay? I think we're out of time. You can ask me afterwards. I want to go back to the slide. Do you know why it's so blank? I didn't want to give you, I like visuals usually, I didn't want to put all of those in there, so I don't frame the way you think of what is news. Okay? So just leave it blank, just white. So it's just that question. Thank you all.